As promised, our guest today is Dr. Nicholas Gebelt. He's an attorney at law. Dr. Gebelt is a certified bankruptcy specialist here in the state of California, representing small business owners, individuals, and married couples who seek relief from creditors. In addition to having a thriving law practice, Dr. Gebelt is also a mathematician and an adjunct faculty member at Biola University. Welcome to Safe Money Talk, and thank you very much for joining us today. Thanks for taking some time out of what I know must really be a hectic schedule between you and your law firm and teaching at Biola to join us today.
I do teach probability and statistics there because I have a PhD in mathematics, and then most of my time is devoted to doing bankruptcy. And in that capacity, I've seen a fairly wide spectrum of reasons why people go into bankruptcy. And certainly one that has been fairly consistent over the years is medical debt. You have people with some sort of catastrophe in their lives, and they have a hospital stay, surgery, whatever it is, and rack up a lot of medical debt, and as a result, they need some kind of debt relief. And so that is one of the drivers historically that's been a part of the bankruptcy structure. And that was one of the arguments that was given in favor of having the Affordable Care Act, which is known also as Obamacare. The whole Obamacare promise was that there wouldn't be any more medical bankruptcies because everybody would be taken care of. That was one of the fundamental pillars of Obamacare. There were a couple of other pillars of Obamacare. You may remember, and you can see this on YouTube anytime you want, lots and lots of videos where the president said, if you like your current plan, if you like your physician, you get to keep them. And another thing that he promised was that people's premiums would go down by about $2,600 a year. And so we need to test those to see whether or not the president was telling the truth. Well, before I get into that, what I would like to talk about for just a second is something that is of a very fundamentally serious nature regarding Obamacare, and that is its role, the role of government in people's lives. People who haven't read the Constitution might not be aware of one of the main driving points of the U.S. Constitution. That is to protect the citizens from their government. When the Constitution was first developed, there had been a mindset in the colonies and then in the young country that strong governments tend to oppress people. And, of course, their experience with George III really confirmed this in their minds. And so they set up their big ideas in the Constitution. And there were several big ideas. One was to break things up, break the power up so that part of it resided with the states, and each state would have its own government, and then part of the power would be in the federal government. But that wasn't good enough, because there was still the concern that government could be too strong and oppress the people. So it had to be broken up even further. And it was broken up into three pieces on the federal level. There was the legislative branch, the Congress, and in the Constitution, right after the preamble, the very first sentence says, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which will consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. So that means that any law that's passed must be passed by Congress, not by the executive branch. The second article deals with the power of the executive branch, and the third with the judicial branch. And the idea here was to break things up so that the government couldn't oppress the people. And after the Constitution was drafted, there was a move to say we need still further protections against the power of government. And that led to the drafting of the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. All of these were designed to protect the population from the government. So you'll see, for example, in the Bill of Rights, such things as Congress shall make no law concerning. These are designed to prevent a government from taking away freedoms from people. One of the things that stands out with Obamacare is it is a fundamental intrusion into the economic life of the American populace.
Nick, do you think that was done deliberately?
Absolutely. This was a power grab. This was, we want to control something that is of a fundamental nature to people. And it goes back to the German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, who was ruler in Germany in the 1800s, and he established the Social Security system in Germany. And you might think, well, what an enlightened thing. He was wanting to take care of people. That's not what he said. His argument was, if we are the source, if government is the source of people's sustenance, they will never rebel. And so Social Security in Germany was designed so that people would be dependent on government and they would not challenge government.
And Obamacare, you believe, is a version of that, is a representation of that theme. Okay.
Much so. This is government stepping in and taking control of a very large swath of the American economy and a portion of the American economy that means a great deal to individuals. If you get sick, that's a big deal for you.
But I've seen it more so with seniors because they're the ones, like a car with 100,000 miles on it, they're the ones that break down the most usually. So I found that, young people in their 30s, 40s, they're concerned about their health insurance, but nothing like seniors over 60. That's one of their number one concerns is their health care and their health insurance, their health coverage, etc. Yeah, you're right.
That's right. And so this is a great power grab because if seniors are now held in control by the government over their health care, they have a much less likelihood to try to rebel, to challenge what the government's doing. If
I might, what first caught my attention of you was an article that you did in January this year in which you predicted that Obamacare would cause an increase in bankruptcies, which is actually something that I've been saying for a couple of years now. And I've been called Chicken Little. I definitely want to address this issue, and I'm hoping that you can expand a lot more on that article. Because in that article, if I'm allowed to quote you, you actually say, I suspect that as more people are unable to secure full-time employment and are stuck with 2 or more part-time jobs, and as health care premiums continue to rise, which they have, that there will be a surge in bankruptcy filings. Now, it's a little bit different in what I've been predicting. I've been predicting bankruptcies for seniors, which haven't occurred in the past, more so in the future as a result of the declining and restrictive Medicare networks, okay? That the shrinking Medicare and Obamacare networks are going to cause seniors that want to go see specific doctors and hospitals to pay out of pocket because they won't be covered by their insurance. You're taking a little different tack, but coming up with the same result and ending up at the same location, bankruptcy. So maybe, Nick, kind of expand on that theory a little bit more, please. Is your prediction of more and more bankruptcies and caused by what?
Well, by way of introduction, let me give you a little personal experience. When Obamacare went into effect, my insurance policy was canceled because I'm a sole practitioner and my employee is my wife, who, by the way, has a PhD from UCLA's School of Business, so she's a very good office manager. In any event, our policy was canceled, putting to the lie what the president promised, that if you liked your policy, you liked your physician, you could keep it, period. Of course, my last name wasn't period, so I was out of luck on that one. And then the replacement policy that I got had the premiums go up by several $100s a month. Now, I've turned 60, so I am, I suppose, one of the seniors. My premiums went up, but that was offset by the fact that my deductibles went up. You guessed it, not down, up.
Right.
And the copays went up. Well, the next year, the same thing happened again because the new policy, there are things in Obamacare that trigger the ending of a particular policy so that a lot of policies cannot be compliant year by year. Well, I had that happen to me as well, and so, yet again, the premiums went up, deductibles went up, and the copays went up, and I'm not the only person that's been having this happen. Of course, as a small business owner, I am very much a target because of the structure of Obamacare, but seniors are generally even if they aren't small business owners. And so as the premiums go up, folks need to get insurance someplace. Well, for many years, people have gotten their insurance, health insurance, through their employers. And since it's costing a whole lot more for employers to provide these policies, they cut the hours, because if you're not a full-time employee, then the employer doesn't have to provide the insurance per Obamacare. And so that means that folks are ending up with 2, 3 part-time jobs just to be able to buy their own insurance policy. And if you're a senior, I'm feeling this in my own body, things start to fall apart. I have to go to the doctor, I have to have medicines, and so things start becoming more and more expensive. So as seniors are footing more and more higher and higher bills, it puts a tax on the money that they have available to take care of themselves, especially somebody who's retired.
Let me get this straight. You're attributing more bankruptcies to the front end of Obamacare, which would be the front end cost, meaning the premium increases and the increases to the cost to business owners. Where
well, there is that to the back end cost as well, because folks end up having fairly large medical bills, and if a doctor is unwilling to take care of you because of the
reimbursement reductions, right?
Exactly. Right. Then you end up having more out-of-pocket expenses, and more out-of-pocket expenses, if you have limited income, leads to bankruptcy. And so while bankruptcy filings for the last year or two have gone down some, I'm starting to see just a little bit of an uptick now. And in fact, I had somebody call yesterday who had just come out of the hospital and now had a gargantuan bill, and it turned out that although the person thought the insurance was going to cover it, it didn't cover it, and now that person needs to file for bankruptcy protection.
Right. That was my next question, is if you see bankruptcies going up, and if not, do you predict a spike? Do you predict that they will increase? And I guess you answered both of them, that you haven't seen them, but you expect them to.
I personally am seeing it, and I expect this to happen more and more across the country. Now, I can only, of course, for Southern California, because that's where I'm based. I'm in Whittier, and so you might say I have somewhat of a self-selected audience here of people I serve, and it might not be the same as folks in Omaha, Nebraska, but there are economic principles that are the same coast to coast. Eventually, the government is going to have to cut back, is going to have to ration, if for no other reason than the huge national debt, which grows very, very rapidly every year, is going to take more and more of the budget, so the money that would have been devoted towards paying for medical care under Obamacare is going to have to be funneled into paying the interest on the national debt. And, of course, we need a military. We have all these other things. Sure. Somewhere along the line, we're looking in our radar at a Greece-like meltdown. And I think Obamacare is one of the reasons. And so as the government has to cut back on funding these things, because it just doesn't have the money anymore to take care of the medical costs of seniors, of people who are insured under Obamacare, what that's going to lead to is people having to pay their own way on the medical care. And as that happens, unless their incomes shoot up commensurately, they're going to be facing bankruptcy.
Now, Nick, by the time your clients walk in the front door, it's too late. They've already had these gigantic expenses, and they're already about to declare bankruptcy or need to. However, that being said, what are you doing? And I know you are writing articles and so forth, and I know you have a blog. What are you doing to forewarn people about this before they do have to come in and become one of your clients?
Well, you mentioned I have a blog, Southern California Bankruptcy Law blog, in which I address these things. And, of course, I talk to people who do come in the door. I also have taught seminars and taught specifically about bankruptcy. And so the issue of dealing with debt, and in particular dealing with medical debt, comes up in these presentations. So as much as possible, I try to get the word out. The problem is there is a louder voice, and that is the voice of the government. And there are people that I think just take at face value whatever the government says. That if the government says this is good, well, it must be good. And I think a more critical eye has to be targeted towards the things that government officials say. So when they promise that everything is going to be just fine and we're going to have, streets paved with gold, we have to be a little bit suspicious that something is afoot here that doesn't quite make sense.
People our age, you and I are the same age. One thing I have found, and we talked about this earlier, is how our culture has kind of been conditioned, especially Americans, to not want to hear any bad news. They just don't want to hear it. They don't want to believe it. It can't be that bad. The debt bubble can't be that bad. It's not going to be that bad. The stock market looks like it's going to continue to go. Obamacare doesn't seem like it's impacted me. It must be in my rearview mirror. I've found that most Americans are not proactive. They're reactive. And that most of the people that I talk to and see, they don't look for and seek help or answers until after it's too late. After the bomb's already blown up underneath them. The landmine's already gone off.
Right. The people I serve are people that didn't pay attention, and they come in because they need bankruptcy. Now, having said that, I don't want to attack my clients because I think they're good people. I have generally felt that the people that come through my door are honest people who've suddenly faced some sort of catastrophe, whether it's a job loss or a healthcare catastrophe, and they need help. But it doesn't help.
Or they weren't fortunate enough to hear our forewarning, Nick.
Well, there is that too. Yes, I agree.
They weren't fortunate enough, like the folks on this radio show, to hear our forewarning. You do mention in your last blog, I think I read it, is that you dispute the administration's claims that the economy is improving. What are you seeing in your practice in particular that contradicts the media and the government's claim that the economy is improving?
Well, every person that comes through my door eventually has to show me their pay stubs and their income tax returns for several years. And when I look at these and compare what was happening in the past, incomes are going down, at least for the people I serve. And you might say, well, of course, these are people in bankruptcy, but a few years ago, they were also people in bankruptcy. And yet I'm seeing more people with part-time jobs, maybe 2 or 3 jobs, and their total income is going down. And I'm having more people coming through the door who don't have work at all, and they haven't been able to find work for quite some time, and that's why they're going through a bankruptcy, because they no longer can keep robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it's because the jobs just aren't there. Now, you might look in the newspaper and it says, oh, the jobs are here in California, unemployment is down. The problem with that is when you toss in people who are underemployed, who have part-time jobs and say they are employed, it's not quite the same thing as saying, well, everybody's got a good job and we're all living in the land of plenty. Yes, there are people who are working who are considered to be employed, but if they're working 15, 20 hours a week, is that really what we want to think of as a person who's employed? And so there's a big underclass that seems to be growing of people who are underemployed, and they are still part of the rosy statistic that unemployment is dropping.
Well, Dr. Gebelt, I want to thank you for being on the show. You've been a fabulous guest, as expected. It's great to meet another kindred spirit. You know, you and I they're calling us Chicken Little these days, Nick, but pretty soon they're going to be calling us Paul Revere. For those listeners that want to be able to get a hold of you or have some questions for you, your website is?
www.goodbye2debt.com, but the 2 is the digit 2.
Right, so that's www.goodbye2debt, so goodbye2debt.com, and your blog address, once again, I wrote it down, is www.southern-california-bankruptcy-law-blog, right?
.com, that's right. southern-california-bankruptcy-law-blog.com. And they can also give me a call if anybody wants to. I'm at 562-777-9159. And sometimes I get calls from all over the country. I will say I'm only licensed to practice in California, so I can't give legal advice if you don't live in California. But if nothing else, I can give you a referral to somebody in your particular part of the country that may be able to help you. But bankruptcy is, I think, a very good thing. Believe it or not, it's in the Constitution, and the very first article is one of the enumerated powers of Congress. It's also in the Bible, and you might look that up in Deuteronomy chapter 15. The first two verses mandate bankruptcy every 7 years in ancient Israel. So it is a good thing. What's not such a good thing is when government policy forces people into bankruptcy. Life is filled with all sorts of uncertainty, and, sometimes you'll face an upheaval in your life that just happened. It was unforeseen. What you don't want is the government contributing to the economic climate that drives people into bankruptcy. That's the problem with Obamacare. So, yes, bankruptcies are start marching their way up in numbers because of Obamacare. And the sad thing here is, while I think bankruptcy is a good thing, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't. What I object to is that the government is the cause.
Amen to that, Nick. Dr. Nicholas Gebelt, attorney at law, certified bankruptcy specialist here in the state of California. We'll be right back.